Monroe here from Loudoun County and Stacy Medrano from Fairfax County to talk to us about building a strong volunteer program. Would you ladies introduce yourselves?
Okay, good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here. Amelia and I are excited to spend some time with you talking about building a strong volunteer team. Today, we'll be exploring some of the key aspects of what it takes to build a solid volunteer team, all while creating a positive volunteer culture and establishing clear expectations and boundaries. My name is Stacy Medrano. I'm the volunteer coordinator here at Fairfax County Animal Shelter. I've had the privilege of working for Fairfax County for the past 23 years. I've been in my current role at the animal shelter since January of 2024. Before joining the shelter, I spent 22 years with the juvenile court system as the juvenile probation officer. So I know it seems like a total shift in directions, but you'd be surprised at how much my experience building relationships, understanding needs, and guiding individuals has really translated so well into volunteer management. After all, at its core, volunteer management is about building strong relationships while establishing clear expectations. So it's been a fun change for me. Amelia?
Hi, my name is Amelia Monroe. I am the volunteer coordinator and foster coordinator for Loudoun County Animal Services. I've been in my role here for 8 years now. And like Stacy says, we come from all walks of life where we bring our experience in. My previous volunteer management experience came through United States Fish and Wildlife Service, where I worked primarily as a visitor services ranger and as a lighthouse keeper. So we come from everywhere. So I'll go ahead and start us off, Stacy.
Yep.
All right. All right. So starting off, I know we all just want to jump into volunteers. But one of the biggest things that we should keep in mind when we're planning for volunteers, whether we're starting a volunteer program or we're picking one back up or building our program, is planning is really, really about ensuring that you are more ready for your volunteers than they are ready for you. You want to make sure that you have everything prepared. If your volunteers are going to walk in and the doors are not unlocked or something is not set out for them, they are not going to come back. This is something they want to have a good experience at too. I know that sounds intimidating, but it doesn't need to be a big hurdle. So one of the things that this is really like setting you up for success. If you are more ready for them, you are going to have better staff volunteer relations. You're going to have better retention of volunteers, and you are going to have better general sanity within the shelter. And then the other big point here when you're planning for volunteers is don't reinvent the wheel. Think about it. Stacy said that she comes from working with volunteers. I've worked with volunteers. We've all worked with volunteers in different aspects, not just sheltering. There are tons of resources out there for working with volunteers. Grab them, use them, mush them all together, and make what you need for your volunteer planning. One of the best places to start with volunteer planning is to look at your volunteer position descriptions and create those. Those are basically your skeletons of how your volunteers are going to work within your shelter. Those are your descriptions. So your position descriptions should say your definition of what a role is, from we have canine companion, feline friend, medical assistant, administrative assistant, data entry assistant here at the shelter, pulling those things together, working with your staff to decide what volunteer position descriptions you want to have. Start small, pick one or two, and then continue adding as you need them. But build a definition for each of those descriptions. Decide what requirements. So, for example, we have our feline friends. We have a definition that says they are doing housekeeping, enrichment, and socialization for our cats. The requirements to be a feline friend are you have to be of a certain age, you have to have this amount of training, and you have to have this amount of hours under your belt to get started. List what training they need. And then build with staff to say what else do they need, what is important within this job. Position descriptions are going to get you really far because you can refer back to them for what you need and what volunteers need. Build a budget for your volunteers. It doesn't have to be a big budget. I know not everybody has a lot of resources. A budget can be as simple as, hey, we're going to spend $100 on some volunteer appreciation this year. We're going to have $100 for outreach. We're going to have, it can be very, very minimal. It doesn't have to be big. So look at things like recognition, upkeep of your volunteer program. For us, that's things like smocks. Our volunteers having logo wear to wear in the shelter. Or if you're looking at databases. You want to build volunteer applications. So think about what information you need from your volunteers as they come in. You need their name, their address, a phone number, an email. I know in this, as we're coming up, pronouns. Why do they want to volunteer? Are they here for community service? Are they here for a school program? Think about that information. What roles do they want to start in, whether they want to be dog or cat volunteers? And then I know with the databases, sometimes they ask for a lot of information. What information don't you need? Because you can tag that off of the application sometimes. And then really important is to build your waivers. These are your legal backups. These say, hey, this is why, you can't hold us accountable for any injuries. You are responsible for your own insurance. This is your photographic release. Bear with my voice today, guys. I'm getting over a cold. This says, you won't hold us accountable for first aid. They agree to abide by all of your rules and policies that you've laid out in a volunteer handbook or on the waiver. And as a note for the waiver, there are hundreds of volunteer waiver options online. Utilize them. Copy paste them. Put them together. Cut them up and sew them together. Use what you need. A lot of actual volunteer databases will just give you samples, whether you're using their database or not. Borrow from other shelters. Write your other local shelters, see what they've got. Always have a lawyer look them over. I know here in Loudoun, our Loudoun lawyer is required to look them over. She does a great job at that. But even before I hand those over to her, I have a bunch of volunteers who are lawyers, and I have them look them over to say, is this legal? And usually they say, I don't know what you're writing down. So we can fix a few things before it goes up to the actual lawyers that we're paying. So have somebody look at that to make sure it is binding. Usually on my waiver, I also put a small emergency contact there so they can sign and then have an emergency contact. And then tracking volunteer data is essential. Thinking about a way you're going to track volunteer information and data. So that can be very simple for you guys. Taking something as simple as an Excel sheet to track hours, to something like using Logistics, Better Impact, Cheetah, some of those bigger databases that you look at based on how many volunteers you're using and what levels of volunteers you're using. There's also some options. I know in Loudoun County, we have an organization called Loudoun Cares, and they pay for their own database. They pay for Galaxy Digital, which is a volunteer database that takes on volunteer information, counts hours, things like that. But then organizations around the county can use Galaxy Digital through them to track volunteer hours for free. So, all right. And then on each of these slides, we're going to give you an action item that is an easy thing to do for volunteers. So the action item for planning for volunteers is to help you create position descriptions using what I was taught as the red light, green light method. Basically, make a list of everything you and your staff are doing right now and make 3 columns, green, yellow, red, and put those things in those columns. Green is everything that a volunteer can easily do with little to no training. Yellow is everything that a volunteer can do with some training, and red is volunteers should not be doing this. And then go through those columns, take everything in red and say, nope, this is not something we need to make a position description for. Take those yellow and green columns and start looking at what you want to make position descriptions for. One other piece of advice I was given on this has always been great is there may be some things in that green column that you're like, hey, it's in the green column. We should probably give it to volunteers because it's easy. But that your staff or you still really love doing, keep them. If they're not taking up too much of your time and they're really fun and they give you some smiles, keep those things. They make you happy. They help you stay. So there's that. We're going to move on here to onboarding. All right, so once you've planned for your volunteers, you are ready to bring them into your shelter, get them to working. So we've got to find our volunteers first, which is our outreach and our recruitment. Think about, you've got your position descriptions. Now, what volunteers do you want? What pools of people are you pulling from? Are you looking for retirees? Are you looking for students? Who are you looking for? When you think about that, then decide what outreach methods you're going to use. Are you going to advertise at local schools? Are you going to advertise at local churches, post offices? You can put things so many places. And I would say, you could say for the younger crowd, you're really going to hit the social media like Facebook and Instagram. I would tell you that, but I would also tell you that my grandmother is on Facebook much more often than any of my cousins or siblings. So like you can get that retiree crowd on Facebook and Instagram. But look at where you're posting things. The gyms. I know a lot of folks from the gyms come in and say, hey, I'd love to walk your dogs. Love to go out for a run. So think about those outlets where you can find the people that are going to match your need. Just be clear. Be very clear in your messaging of what you're looking for. That enrichment, housekeeping, socialization, because we all know that we have a lot of people that come in and want to walk dogs. They do not want to scoop poop or do laundry. Be very clear if you expect them to do all of the above, or if you're just looking for housekeeping assistant right now. Be clear about what you want for hours commitments. Here we ask for 8 hours a month for a commitment of at least 6 months. We are very clear about that, and that does knock probably about 25% of the people I hear writing in. They say, hey, I want to volunteer. And I say, okay, can you do 8 hours a month for at least 6 months? And about 25% say, what other options do you have? So work on being clear in your messaging there. The next step is orientation. You want to make sure in orientation you are reiterating some of those basic volunteer requirements and rules. Looking for 8 hours. These are the things we require. These are the things we expect for your dress. You got to make sure you have long pants, closed-toed shoes, things like that. Reiterate those things. You want them to sink in. And then introduce your point of contact, your volunteer coordinator, and the general shelter. So you want them to know this is their main point of contact here. Stacy is the person they're going to be talking to. They can talk to anybody. They can ask anybody questions, but Stacy is their main point of contact. And introduce them to the basic shelter, where things are, what's going on, what their basic jobs are going to be. I like in my orientations to give a basic general rundown of the animals. Whether it's cats or dogs, I try to tie in a little bit of basic fear-free sheltering into that with a little bit of, hey, this is not your pet, this is a shelter pet, and this is how we interact so that we can have a fear-free interaction. I try to tie that into all of my orientations. Background checks and references are a really big question for a lot of people. One, because they cost money. And for a lot of us looking at that, we're looking at our budget again. Did we plan for background checks and references in our time allotment for getting people on board and in our budget allotment? Think about what information do you need? One of our big requirements we have is that people they can't have any animal related crimes that they're associated with. So no abuse, neglect, cruelty tied to them if they are going to volunteer here at the shelter. We do have humane law enforcement as part of our shelter, so we have that within our own database. We can do a basic background check for animal cruelty and neglect within our database without having any extra charge. We do check all of our drivers through the county. They have a basic check that the county does if they're going to drive a county vehicle. And And if anybody is going to be working with kids through our humane education program, we do a basic check through the National Sex Offender Registry to make sure no one is on that. Actionable item for this one is when you're doing your outreach, you don't have to make it really complicated. There are free platforms with really cool templates to make your outreach materials look super professional. I know we all love Word, and I love Word to death, but it still sometimes looks like the 90s if we're making outreach materials using Word documents. Go into a program like Canva. I think Google has some. You can just Google search templates, and it lets you pull up your template. It lets you put your organization's logo and branding on there using your colors, and you can just plug those things in, plug in your wordage, and you have a completely professional template that's attractive, and it's free, and you can often share it. So, all right, Stacy, I'm going to pass it over to you.
Ready. All right, culture, staff relations. Oh, sorry, I gotta get in this chair right here. All right, so what is volunteer culture? Volunteer culture refers to shared values, principles, attitudes that guide how volunteers are involved in an organization's work. It's about how volunteers are recruited, trained, and supported, and how they interact with the animals, the staff, and with each other. So a strong volunteer culture helps shelters run smoothly and provides better care for the animals. So let's dive into some of the key elements that help shape a strong volunteer culture. First, a shared passion for animal welfare. At the heart of every volunteer's motivation is usually a deep love for animals and a strong desire to improve their lives. So this is what drives volunteers to put in their time and energy into volunteering. And a culture built on compassion and dedication makes sure that volunteers' energy is channeled effectively into caring for the animals and advancing the shelter's mission. Second is collaboration and teamwork. Shelters thrive on teamwork. I know that our volunteers touch every aspect of our shelter. And so volunteers are often working side by side with staff on critical tasks, whether it's providing direct care to animals, organizing adoption events, or engaging in public outreach. To do this effectively, volunteers and staff have to work together. Fostering a culture that prioritizes collaboration is a key to ensuring the shelter operates smoothly. So next is training and support. And Amelia touched on this a bit. A strong volunteer culture also provides volunteers with the proper training and ongoing support, whether it's understanding animal behavior, learning basic techniques, or familiarizing themselves with safety protocols. Volunteers need to feel confident as well as prepared in their roles. Continuous training opportunities help them grow their skills and deepen their connection to the organization. Next is respect and recognition. The work volunteers do in animal shelters is often physically demanding and emotionally taxing. That's why it's crucial to create a culture of respect and appreciation. A simple thank you can go a long way, but public recognition, whether it's through small gestures like thank you notes or more formal acknowledgements, can have a big impact on morale. When volunteers feel valued, they're more likely to stay engaged and motivated. And finally, commitment and reliability. Volunteers who feel truly connected to the shelter's mission and who are part of a positive and supportive culture are often the most committed and reliable. When volunteers feel supported and respected, they're more likely to stick around for the long term, contributing to stability and dependable volunteer base. A thriving volunteer culture is built on passion, collaboration, support, respect, and commitment. So each of these elements plays a critical role in creating a sustainable, effective, and rewarding experience for both the volunteers, the staff, and the animals that they help. So why is volunteer culture so important in an animal shelter? It's critical for the care of the animals. Animal shelters depend on volunteers for essential tasks such as walking, cleaning, and socializing the animals. And a positive volunteer culture ensures that volunteers are motivated, trained, and capable of providing the best care possible for the animals. So whether it's providing social interaction to shy animals, rehabilitating those with behavior issues, or simply just offering companionship. And so also filling staffing gaps. Shelters are often operating with limited resources and staff, especially in situations with high intake or during busy periods of time or time of year. Volunteers help fill the gaps, providing extra hands to keep the shelter running effectively. Enhanced public relations and community engagement. A healthy volunteer culture fosters an environment where volunteers feel confident and proud to represent the shelter in the community. They help spread awareness about the shelter's mission. They encourage adoptions, and they can even recruit other volunteers for your program. Sustainability and long-term impact. A positive and supportive volunteer culture encourages retention and long-term involvement. When volunteers are treated well and feel a deep connection to the shelter's mission, they're more likely to continue to contribute their time and the resources over the long term. And this helps sustain the shelter's operation and impacts the lives of more animals. It also contributes to improved adoption outcomes. Volunteers play a key role in our shelter in helping animals get adopted by promoting the animals, interaction with potential adopters, and providing valuable information about the animal's temperament and needs. You know, volunteers spend a lot more time with our animals here typically than our staff do. And so they are able to help us get more information about animal's behavior and, you know, their exchange with the animal. So a well-trained, motivated volunteer team can be a game changer in boosting adoption rates and ensuring animals are placed in the right homes. So volunteer culture is crucial for smooth operations of the shelter, for the well-being of the animals, and for the engagement of the broader community. It ensures that volunteers are empowered, appreciated, and effective in their roles, which ultimately leads to a better outcome for the animals that are in care. How do you know if you have a positive volunteer culture or not? Some of the signs of a healthy volunteer culture are clear communication. Effective communication ensures that volunteers receive clear instructions, expectations, and updates about their roles and the shelter's needs. It ensures that everyone's on the same page and allows volunteers to have confidence in performing their assignments. Training and support. Volunteers who are given proper training, resources, and ongoing support are more effective, feel more confident, and they're less likely to become frustrated or overwhelmed. Respect and appreciation. Volunteers who feel respected and appreciated for their time, skills, and effort, they feel valued. So showing appreciation boosts the morale and retention and helps them stay engaged. Relationships and teamwork. Volunteers work well together and collaborate with staff. There's a mutual respect between staff and volunteers, and both groups are supporting each other. Support for volunteer well-being. Volunteers are encouraged to take breaks, practice self-care, and have their emotional well-being supported, especially given the emotional taxing nature of shelter work. Preventing burnout and promoting mental health helps maintain motivated, happy volunteer base and ensures they continue to contribute effectively. Celebrating success and milestones. When an organization celebrates accomplishments, it boosts morale, acknowledges hard work, and reminds everyone of the positive impact that they came to your shelter to make. And then a culture of accountability. Volunteers take responsibility for their tasks and feel accountable to one another in the shelter. A sense of accountability helps ensure that the shelter's operation runs smoothly and that the animals receive the care they need. So a healthy volunteer culture in an animal shelter is marked by clear communication, respect, support, and shared sense of mission. Volunteers are well trained, they feel appreciated, and they're given opportunities for growth. And when volunteers feel valued, like they're part of the team, and they're emotionally supported, they're more likely to stay engaged, work effectively, and contribute to your shelter's success. So the ABCs of working effectively with volunteers. So A is for acknowledge, B is for be prepared, and C is for communicate. And so under acknowledge, this is where our actionable item comes into play. Try using the 10-4 rule and notice the impact that it has on your volunteer community. And the 10-4 rule is this: if another human being is within 10 feet of you, you must make eye contact with him or her and smile. And then if another human being is within 4 feet of you, you must make eye contact, smile, but also verbally acknowledge him or her. Okay, so try that in your organization and see if it makes a difference in how volunteers engage with you and with your staff. Teach it to your staff. Because a smile makes a volunteer feel valued. It creates a friendly atmosphere where they'll want to come back again and again. Say thank you often and sincerely. It's really that simple. Help volunteers to feel accepted and like they're part of the team. Without them, we couldn't do the work that we do. So they are part of the team. And then recognition, thank you notes, staff volunteer events, or maybe even a shout out in the weekly email that you might send out. Be prepared. This is what Amelia talked about. Welcome volunteers and make sure that they have what they need when they arrive. The first impression is everything. So, you know, you want the first people that they see to be friendly and to welcome them into the shelter. You want to make them feel like they belong, even if they've never walked through your doors before. You want to learn their names. It's okay if you can't remember names. I think we have close to 400 volunteers. I can't remember everybody's name. Name tags are helpful, but also don't be afraid to ask. If you can't remember their name, ask them. You want to have their supplies and materials available, have clear instructions, and assist with on-the-job training. And that comes from all staff, you know, being willing to jump in and help as things are happening. And the C in the ABCs is communicate. Be genuine and kind and honest in your communications, written or spoken. Never assume, and then maintain appropriate boundaries as you would with any coworker. Building relationships amongst volunteers and staff, you know, it's important, and you want volunteers to feel a personal connection to the other volunteers and the staff. Their efforts become a rewarding social outlet to them as well. Never talk negatively about the shelter, staff, patrons, or volunteers. And you want to work alongside the volunteers. Get up from your desk and go see what they're doing. I like to get up and go into the cat room and interact with the volunteers that are in there. I'm still relatively new here, so I look every day to see if there's volunteers here that I don't know. And I make it a point to get up and go introduce myself to them and meet them and get to know a little bit about them. So you'll find that goes a long way. All right, next slide, Amelia. Setting boundaries for success. So setting clear boundaries and expectations with volunteers is essential for creating a positive, productive, and safe environment for both the volunteers and the animals. Volunteers need to understand what's expected of them, what they can and cannot do, and how their roles contribute to the overall mission. Clear boundaries also helps prevent misunderstandings, and it protects both the shelter staff and the volunteers from potential stress, liability, and conflict. So why is setting boundaries and expectations important? Safety. It ensures both the animals and the volunteers are safe during interaction, particularly with harder to manage animals. Clarity. It helps volunteers understand their role and responsibilities, and it reduces confusion and frustration. It helps to prevent burnout. Volunteers, it keeps them from overcommitting when they know what the expectation of the hours that they are to do is clear. It keeps them able to manage tasks and not feel overwhelmed. Respect promotes a culture of a mutual respect between staff and volunteers and the animals. And consistency helps ensure that consistent levels of care for animals and a smooth shelter operation. So some of the steps for setting clear boundaries and expectations is to define the volunteer roles and responsibilities. Like Amelia said, it doesn't have to be complicated, but just clearly outline the tasks for each volunteer and what they'll be responsible for, such as feeding, cleaning, walking dogs, socializing cats, assisting with adoptions, or helping with fundraisers. This prevents volunteers from stepping outside of their comfort zone or engaging in tasks that they're not trained for. It ensures the shelter operates smoothly and all necessary tasks are covered so that the volunteers know what they can do and what they can't do. Create a volunteer handbook. Develop a handbook that includes information about the shelter's policies, procedures, and expectations for behavior. We just rolled out our brand new handbook, which we're very excited to have. It has things in it like the hours of operation, the dress code, closed-toed shoes are necessary here, appropriate clothing. It has handling animals and safety protocols in it, confidentiality regarding shelter operations and animal care, and protocols for interacting with the public at adoption events, tours, things like that. The handbook acts as a reference point for volunteers to ensure that they're aware of and can easily refer back to the shelter's guidelines. So having clear policies and procedures creates a framework for volunteers to know what to expect. You want to communicate expectations up front and be very clear. Clearly explain what is expected of volunteers before they even start. So that includes the time commitment, such as minimum number of hours per month or week, the specific tasks and duties like caring for different types of animals, the administrative help or event support. And it also has the shelter rules and policies, hygiene standards. Should they wash their hands between interacting with every single dog? What are your protocols? And this helps keep everything safe. So when expectations are clearly stated from the beginning, it prevents misunderstandings and it ensures that everyone understands what their role is in the shelter. So set boundaries around interactions with animals. You want to define specific guidelines for how the volunteers should interact with the animals, such as the type of animals they're allowed to work with based on their training or their comfort level. One thing I tell every volunteer here is please don't do anything that you're not comfortable with. You know, it gives them the ability to have an out, to say, you know, it's okay. You don't have to feel that pressure to do everything. And different volunteers may have different levels of training required. And communicating that from the beginning helps volunteers to understand that the levels and why they exist. So you're setting boundaries to both protect the animals and the volunteers. Communication protocols. Explain to volunteers how they should report issues or concerns, such as injuries, behavior issues with animals, or problems with their shift. Who do they contact if they can't make a shift? What are they supposed to do? And where are they supposed to report safety hazards, animal health concerns, or any issues with the shelter environment? Our volunteers have a medical whiteboard that they put non-emergency medical concerns on that our staff check daily. So it's an easy way for them to be able to let shelter staff know what's happening or what they see. So this clear communication helps address problems early. It prevents mishaps and it ensures that all concerns are handled appropriately. You want to provide a support system for volunteers. assign a point of contact for who can help answer their questions, provide support, and guide volunteers with any challenges that they face. We utilize volunteer liaisons. So they're volunteers who have been here for quite a while. They know quite a bit about our shelter. They are able to answer questions or concerns from other volunteers. And so it's kind of a layer between the volunteers and the staff. They're absolutely always welcome to come to me with questions or concerns, but a lot of times, you know, they've built that relationship with our liaison and they'll go directly to them. So having that dedicated person for support helps volunteers feel more comfortable and confident in their role, and they know that they have someone that they can turn to for assistance. Another important boundary is the volunteers' boundaries. So it's important to respect their boundaries. Just like your organization has boundaries for volunteers, the volunteers also allowed to have boundaries for themselves. So they have the right to set their own terms. So what kind of tasks they're willing to do and take on, you know, some people want to work with dogs, but only want to work with dogs that are easy to walk. And other people want to work with the more challenging animals. So they're allowed to decide. They pick their level of comfort with different animals. They're also allowed to set their schedule and their availability. Yes, we have a minimum number of hours that we require, but there's flexibility in that schedule for them. And they're also allowed to take themselves off of a shift. If they sign up and something happens that they can't come in, they're allowed to remove themselves from the schedule. So they should never feel pressure to take on tasks that they're not comfortable with, and respecting their boundaries helps to ensure a more positive volunteer experience. So another part of boundaries is enforcement and accountability and consistency. So clearly communicating consequence if boundaries or expectations are not followed. For example, what happens if they miss a shift without telling anybody? They just don't show up. What happens if they don't follow safety protocols, or they're inappropriately handling animals that they're not trained to handle? So consistency and enforcement of rules ensures that all volunteers are held to the same standards and that the shelter runs smoothly and safely. Clear boundaries and expectations with volunteers is vital for maintaining a productive and safe environment in an animal shelter. And by defining these roles and expectations clearly and creating guidelines for interactions with animals, you foster open communication. You ensure that volunteers understand their responsibilities and can perform their duties effectively. It also helps protect the shelter, staff, animals, and volunteers by preventing misunderstandings, ensuring safety, and promoting respect and professionalism. Some of the roots of negative behavior is usually lack of knowledge. They don't understand what the rules or procedures are. Maybe it hasn't been clearly defined for them. Sometimes it's personal viewpoints that conflict with the program. Also, different personal obstacles, time constraints, jobs, families, other commitments. And sometimes it ends up being compassion, stress, and fatigue. So those are typically the roots of negative behavior. But what do you do with that? Turn them into teachable moments. Volunteers are here because they want to help us in the way that we want to be helped. So if they're not doing something the right way, most would rather you step in and show them how to do it correctly instead of not saying anything, rolling your eyes, and waiting until they're gone to fix it. So address immediate safety issues and protocol violations on the spot. Acknowledge what's happening, inquire why they think that's the way that that they should have done it, and then redirect and offer support. Be helpful. And then also go back and follow up with them. Make sure that they understand what you talked about, you know, and that they're following the protocols. So if a behavior persists, though, you may want to have to reevaluate if your organization is a good fit for them, for that volunteer. And that's okay too, because sometimes that happens. Part of our actionable item on this slide is to create a virtual idea box and to provide clear communication options and ideas for ideas or questions. And so communication options, having multiple communication options helps ensure that every volunteer can stay up to date and engaged in the program. Volunteers need to feel informed, supported, and connected to the team and the organization. And some of the communication strategies and tools that you could provide for your volunteers would be an email. Do you send out weekly email that provides organizational updates, upcoming events, volunteer needs, or other information relevant to their volunteer experience, such as happy adoption updates? Consider setting up a dedicated email address for volunteers to communicate questions, concerns, and needs. This is something that we've done this year. It takes the guesswork out of who they have to contact. They just send an email to to our volunteer email address, and then whoever's appropriate responds to it. So they don't have to remember, should I send it to this person or this person? Create a virtual idea box. This has been really cool here. It allows volunteers to submit their ideas for improvements to shelter operations and processes. People come from all walks of life. They have all different kinds of experiences. Maybe they volunteered somewhere else and wherever they were had a great way of doing something. Well, we want to hear about it. So it's a great way for volunteers to feel like they're part of the team. Just be clear that some ideas will be considered, or all ideas will be considered, and some will come out of that idea box, but some will stay there forever. It just depends. So that's been really fun here. In social media and private groups, many volunteers feel more connected to an organization through social media and private online groups, such as Facebook groups. These platforms can help volunteers interact with each other, share experiences, and stay motivated. We tend to reserve our social media group for volunteers to share their happy tales and their pictures. Again, it allows us to gather experiences that they're having with animals. It gives us behavioral information that we can take and then pass on to potential adopters. And then finally, in-person opportunities for communication. An example of this could be quarterly or semi-annual roundtable meetings. It allows for face-to-face connections and can help volunteers feel that personal connection with you. Right. Your turn.
Let's see. All right. Onward and forward to one of my favorite parts of volunteer land. Ready for this, Stacy? Because I'm going to toss some of this at you too, right?
Okay.
We talked about this, right? Okay, so who doesn't love recognition? Because we love our volunteers. They do so much for us. So recognition can be, like Stacy said, as simple as a thank you, as simple as knowing their name, the small everyday things that are so easy that we sometimes overlook. I watch the glow on people's faces when they walk in the front door and somebody says good morning, or as they walk out the door and somebody says thank you. Knowing their names is the really easy upfront one. And like Stacy said, you don't actually have to know their name. You can ask their name. We have hundreds of volunteers here the same, and I don't know nobody's name. So here's the deal. Make name badges part of the requirement for the dress code. Because A, it makes sure that the staff doesn't have to remember all the volunteers either. They're going to know who's there. If there's an issue, they can tell you who is there. Name badges are good. Also, we use our name badges to communicate with staff about what training level our volunteers are on. They have different color levels on their name badges. So that helps, but it also helps you know their name. So you can go, hey, Barb, and you don't have to think too much. Or if you're like, oh my gosh, is that Barb or Susan? Oh my gosh. You're like, okay, I'm positive I'm not going to call this person that I've known for 2 years by the wrong name because I'm having a slow day. So small, easy, everyday things like that. Another thing that I really love that's pretty easy for volunteer recognition is National Volunteer Week. Happens the third week in April every year. And it's a good time to just have some great fun with the volunteers. Go a little bit out of your way. There's not doesn't really have to be a budget involved. I decorate our volunteer office. Basically, I think this past year I bought some of those little swirly streamers that come down from the ceiling and put all those up. And I printed all the pictures of our volunteers doing stuff around the shelter from the past year and posted them all on the wall. And then I did a whole tree and I gave all of our staff members little construction paper leaves. I said, hey, write 1 or 2 things that say why you love volunteers. And then we decorated that tree with all those leaves. So little things, super easy, super quick to do. Putting out snacks for them because it coincides with Volunteer Week. Points of Light does a volunteer hours award every year, and it's May 1 through April 30th. So I pick my top hours earners every year and give out Points of Light awards, service awards every year. We do a volunteer game night every National Volunteer Week, which is great. We've got a turnout of it's not a ton of people. It's probably 30 people for volunteer game night, but you just have a big room of people playing Scrabble and exploding kittens, which is really fun and really absurd. Just anything that we come up with, Battleship. I go by the thrift stores locally and just pick up whatever they've got. And then one thing that we've really had fun with that I found at a conference, and I was like, this is kind of stupidly fun. It's called the Golden Egg Hunt. And I pull out a whole bunch of golden Easter eggs and I stuff keychains or things. I don't put snacks in them because they get hid all around the shelter, but keychains or anything in them, something little, stickers, toys, temporary tattoos, and I hide them. I might hide them above the dishwasher. I might put one just somewhere where they might be working and they can find them and collect them. People love it.
As Amelia said, you don't recreate the wheel. She told me about her golden eggs, and we used that here this year at our shelter. And it was a huge success. Ended up turning into quite a competition for people to be able to find the golden eggs. So, just something fun. As far as awards, we are actually gearing up for our annual holiday party. It's a great way to bring staff and volunteers together. So we do a staff and volunteer holiday party. We're catering dinner for them. And then we'll also do volunteer and staff awards during that time. And you can think outside of the box. It doesn't always have to be about hours or about the amount of time that they spend. But is there somebody that comes into the shelter and it makes everybody laugh? Or is there somebody who comes in and they might be working with small animals, but are they also in the cat room getting to know all the volunteers in the cat room? Are they personable? Things like that. We've brought on volunteers for our new campus in Loudoun, and it's just been really great and fun to watch them all interact with each other and build that community. So, it doesn't have to be complicated. Last year, I know that at the Volunteer Award, they created paintings and used paw prints on the painting, and that was the award. But just recognizing what volunteers have done for the shelter over the year is super important.
Yeah, and like you said, they can be little things. And hours are, you do want to consider that hours are an accessibility thing. Our retirees can put in a ton of hours. Our working parents have to consider what's going on during school, after school, for their work hours. Think about all those other things going on. So make those awards for those things that you're seeing. And there are a ton of awards that you can reach out for, like the Points of Light, the Virginia Service Awards. Obviously, people do their own Volunteer of the Year, Volunteer of the Month, but you can make them fun and crazy. We've done, when I was in school, we always called them paper plate awards, but you don't have to use paper plates. We did rummage through thrift shops and found all different Christmas ornaments, and then we spray painted them gold and put them on top of little ramekins that we spray painted gold, and they got little labels on them that said, Queen of Laundry or something like that. So you make your own, and they're a little funky, but they're a lot of fun, and people adore them. So also, volunteer swag is a really good one if you've got some budget for it. We do give out t-shirts as part of our logo wear once they reach 8 hours. For our volunteers, also, if you don't have a budget for it, you can say, hey, do you want swag? You can get your own. We do a volunteer store once a year that we open up, and it's open for 15 days through one of our local organizations. You can use things like Campfire and My Impact. It's not My Impact, excuse me, For Imprint. And Custom Ink and things will do this for you. We use a local organization. But they'll post up things with your logo wear, like hats, t-shirts, sweatshirts, fleeces, sweatpants, and then the volunteers can buy their own goodies, and you don't have to worry about having a budget for that. For those of you who are looking to do a little fundraiser through that, a lot of things like Campfire will do a fundraiser through the actual store as well. And also, one of the really big things is trust the volunteers with jobs, and they don't have to be big jobs. You don't have to say, go move this mountain. Here's the 25 steps to do it. For a good example, I'm going to introduce you to this volunteer on this slide. Her name is Rebecca. Rebecca came in one day when I was working with these kittens, and she said, oh my gosh, these kittens, am I allowed to touch them? They're so tiny. Oh my, I know I can't touch them. I can't touch them. They're too small. And I said, no, go put on some gloves. I could really use some help cleaning them. They were at that age where they'd been in the bin and they'd been suckling on each other. And you all know they turn brown at that point. And it was gross. And I said, will you pick up a wet rag and start helping me clean these kittens? She spent half an hour cleaning kittens with me, and she was over the moon. She was so excited that I had trusted her to clean kitten poop off of these 3-week-old kittens. It made all the difference for her to be trusted with that job, and to learn how to do that. So trust them with those little jobs that may not seem big to us, but are really, really huge to them. So, and an action item for this is set a daily goal for yourself. I know we're always like, hey, we're low on time, but set yourself a goal of saying hi. Find 5 volunteers to say thank you to, and 2 people to have a brief, maybe 5-minute or less conversation with. Set that as a goal as an actionable item for volunteers. And then for one last little thing, I want to put this out there because this is something that has been great for Loudoun County Animal Services. Empathy is a learned behavior. And one of the things we have seen is that those that start young as volunteers continue to be volunteers. They are more empathetic as adults. So those who volunteer to youth are more likely to volunteer and donate as adults. We often see youth programs as a lot of extra work. They have higher risk. However, if we look into some very basic ways to make them less risky, we can make them really successful very easily. For example, we started our volunteer apprentice program in 2017. It is for ages 10 to 15 to work with a parent within the shelter. They have to be with their parent at all times. So working with the same animal on the same project, they cannot be out of sight of their parent. And it has been an amazing, amazing program. These volunteer apprentice programs stick with us. When these kids turn 16, they stick with us. When they turn 18, they stick with us. They may go to college, they come back. Their parents stick with us as volunteers. So we have really long-term volunteers. They have a higher rate of reaching their volunteer commitment for 8 hours a month than our individual volunteers. This has also been an amazing program for developing how we work with neurodivergent individuals as well. For some individuals that are not able to work on their own, we are able to set them up within the volunteer apprentice program. It has been a huge boon. So we really encourage you to welcome your youth if you are able. And if you have any questions, I am always always happy to talk about this program. It is one of my absolute favorite. All right, thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here. If anybody has any questions, we'd be happy to answer. Okay. All right. Well, thank you guys so much. We appreciate you. And we hope that you have been able to take away at least one thing that you can bring back to your organization tonight.
Thank you.